Welcome back to the Shepherd's Pie, a slice of hope to raise faithful kids. I'm Tony Kolank, a law school professor, homeschooling columnist, and the author of the Harwood Mysteries fiction series for teens. I've got an exciting announcement on that front, by the way. Book 5 of my series is now in the works at Loyola Press and will be releasing in 2023 sometime. So more to come on that. You can still get books 1 to 4 anywhere books are sold, of course. On today's show, we're going to be discussing how we can help our kids have spiritual growth through creativity and good fiction. My guest is Dominic de Souza, the creator and founder of Legend Fiction. My guest today is Dominic de Souza, a marketer, graphic designer, and the founder of Legend Fiction, which is a community of writers we'll be discussing during the show. He's a graduate of the Writers Institute for Children's Literature. He's authored a children's novel in his own right, and he's written scores of short stories and hundreds of articles on marketing and branding. He's hosted 4 podcasts. He's launched several online communities, including Legend Fiction, and he helps Christian authors realize that writing isn't just a hobby or an exercise, but it can be a spiritual journey. Dominic, welcome to the Shepherd's Pie.
No, I'm happy for a slice. I make a terrible shepherd's pie, but it is one of my favorite things growing up.
I just had shepherd's pie the other night. You know, it depends where you go. It's different everywhere. Yeah. But here, it's about helping to raise faithful kids. And I know that is something that's near and dear to your heart because you have started this wonderful Legend Fiction community that involves teens. And I want to hear all about it today. But first, let's talk a little bit about your background.
I was born in New Zealand and then raised in Australia. And one of the refuges that I would run to was books. And I loved reading books. And then I don't know what happened. Something clicked one day and I realized I can make my own. This is incredible. And that was an itch I could never stop scratching. And it's just been an amazing and beautiful journey since. Now, a variety of things have happened. Of course, you end up getting into business and growing up in high school, and there's just not as much time for things and priorities and stuff. But in the last 10 years, what's been really growing in me is a much, much deeper love of the faith, how to live that out. And I'm now married and I've got a little girl who's 9 years old. And I'm looking back through my childhood and deciding, what do I want to give her? What am I trying to gift to her? What do I want to read aloud with her? What do I think about these things? Do I actually agree with them anymore? And then at the same time, I've got my own creative writing journey and the stories that I want to tell and put out there. But I'm regularly feeling stuck with I'm not good enough, imposter syndrome, I don't have time, blah, blah, blah. What do you do when you're alone and you want to do something is you start a fellowship. You go and you find friends. Well, right when I began to take that really seriously, COVID hit and we were all put into lockdown and didn't know what to do for 2 years. So I went and started one community for Catholics to just see what could be done there. And in doing that, it just became really clear to me again, if we want to have good, healthy, Christic ideas, we need good, healthy stories out there as well. And I'd watched people like, the Catholic Writers Guild, and there's other non-Christian writing forums online, which had been hugely formative for me as a young writer. And it just became really clear, I want to create some kind of a community. It's got a little bit of a different focus in that it's going to be helping us to write riveting stories and content that you could lean over to somebody on the subway and pass to them and say, you're going to love this. It's amazing. Faith inspired was the focus that we ended up taking. So in the last couple of months in November, we celebrated our first anniversary with an online convention called Legend Haven, which absolutely loved putting that together. But we have just created this home online for authors and teens and partners and some sponsors who love the idea of helping to create faith-inspired fiction that's Catholic and Orthodox, because we're grounded in enough of the same, love of reality, love of Christ, love of creation and creativity. And in doing that, what's happened is I've gotten back into writing, and we've also helped other people get back into writing, reignite that spark, that interest. And it's doing exactly what I hoped it would do, is to create a home where we can, as we say, give and get feedback, share your works in progress, grow your writing network, grow your writing portfolio. And kids are doing that. Adults are doing that. They're doubling and tripling their writing output purely by joining us.
That is quite a journey. And I love, so you're calling this thing Legend Fiction. What's the story behind that name? Because that sounds very epic and not very Catholic or Orthodox.
It's ludicrously dramatic. That's kind of the point. Why did we pick that name? Well, we all love legends, and I would say that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example, or Lord of the Rings, or most of these really great, wonderful stories are all legends. For me, on a little more meta level, I loved the phrase of a movie that was maybe well loved. I don't know. I think it's a bit silly, but it was called Legends of the Fall. But I always loved that title and used to think every great story that's ever been told has been a legend of the fall. Some hero or some person struggling with themselves or with everybody else and themselves to overcome a flaw or a cultural weakness or a problem or a misunderstanding and reorienting themselves or contributing something necessary to their culture to become more attuned with what reality actually is. And since, of course, we exist within the state of the fall, we exist within a state of relationship to Christ who comes to resolve that fall, then every life, seen from heaven's eyes, every life is going to be a legend at some point, a legend each of us has lived. And when we, as creators and as writers, start taking that path, that idea seriously, that the stories that we tell are a wrestling with the dynamic of good and evil and sin and judgment and grace and goodness and whatever, then every story has a potential to be like a legend.
Seems like you have started as part of this a teen community, so it seems like your consumer is a young person. Can you speak a little bit to the teen community?
Yeah, when we started, we had a wonderful partner with CatholicHomeschool.online. They have this phenomenal group of families who are looking for alternate homeschool options and just a whole bunch of insanely creative teens who are looking for outlets. And so we started at that time we collaborated over illustration contest. And then out of that, we'd started a writing. It was just a simple little writing group within Catholic Homeschool Online. Out of that, it just became really clear, okay, we need to do something a lot more attentive and focused. And so that's when we started hosting quarterly contests. And then 6 months later, we started hosting writing quests. We put out a quarterly journal. We built a website to host all the stories the kids were writing. We started 2 podcasts, one to talk about the craft of writing, one to talk with authors about what they were writing. And it was wonderful to have you join us. We're considering starting a new one just to talk about this more meta thing that we're doing about writing as a spiritual path and why it's loads of fun and also faithful. And it's just continued to grow and grow. We've launched a mentor program. We've got partnerships with publications. At the core of it, though, are these really phenomenal, excited group of teens who just want to write. And they may be in high school. This mentor program in particular is providing them with, professional feedback on their work. We're getting them used to the process of submitting things and incorporating feedback and writing towards deadlines and that sort of thing. As far as creating a space that is appropriate for teens, because not all writing and all stories are, we did start with a dedicated area for teens within Catholic Homeschool Online. And they were just having so much fun and they were so active. They were putting the author group over to shame. We brought both of those groups together to inspire and sort of mentor and educate each other. And what we've done now is we have a dedicated area within the legend fiction community, specifically for teens from 13 to 17, so they can hang out in there and just chat and meet each other. And then there's also an area for specifically author 17 plus more adult content, because not everything is appropriate for everybody. And then there's the general feed where everybody can just post like whatever they want in there. They're writing, recent movies they're watching, books they're reading, things they're enjoying, questions and that sort of thing. So keeping a moderated space, for age appropriate conversations and discussion is, it's something we're paying attention to.
How large is this teen community? Are they mostly made up of homeschoolers? And pretty much how does it work?
What we do is we have quarterly contests. There's usually at least 1 or 2 just general writing prompt quests provided each quarter. We have weekly meetups. I think there's 2 now at this point. There's like a write-in where everybody's just quiet and you show up in like a Zoom room and you all just write. Or there's like a Sunday hangout where people can just chat with each other. And as far as this teen space, they just do whatever they want in there, just chatting and so on. I'm a part of that. Our mentors are also a part of that to kind of shadow and watch things and see that nothing goes too off the walls. They're wonderfully respectful and they're very mature. And some of the teens are just phenomenally talented. At this point, primarily, they're all homeschoolers from all over the United States and some from around the world, largely because that's where we started, with a community of homeschoolers looking for online community to write and create and so on. But we are continuing to grow and expand, and we would love to continue welcoming teens from any families, whatever your background.
Why fiction? Why teens? Why is that good for their spiritual growth?
So not just for teens, but certainly for all ages. The way that I see it, one of the seminal articles that we put out as we launched Legend Fiction was an idea about the reenchantment or reenchanting reality. In a way, rewilding our fiction to get back in contact with reality. The way that I see it, there are three kinds of, I guess you call them buckets for storytelling that you sort of drop everything into. The first thing is going to be fairy tales. While they cross many age ranges, they have been sifted and filtered by various cultures to be a specific kind of story that does a specific kind of thing in the human spirit. My suggestion is what fairy tales do is they promote a sense of integration of who you are. Actually, I should be more accurate, what you are. Because in every story, they're usually not named, and that's so that you can identify with the characters more closely. And that's what little children especially are looking for, is putting yourself in contact with a variety of different situations and circumstances and so on. You're coming in contact with the numinous, which is something that is completely lost to materialist modern culture. This sense of coming into contact with elves and fairies and angels and gods and all of this, all of that is preparing your capacity to understand what the saints ended up coming in contact with, a spiritual and a material creation. Invariably, what happens with these fairy tale characters is they go on adventures and then they usually come back to being a person or the thing that they started as. And that's something that encourages children to realize, I am good in what I am, and I come into contact with things and I learn from them, and I must learn to be witty and crafty and brave, but I am me. Then there's that next phase, which is especially where teens are, and what they need is mythical tale telling. And the great myths of the ancient world served many functions, some of them deeply religious and so on. I think a lot of them are about, you now have your sense of identity. Now, what do you do with that? How does that come into contact with your culture and other people? Who are you called to be, to grow into? What are you called to do? What is your great and noble purpose? And it's funny, if you think about it, you take out those kinds of stories from a child's development, they have no sense of who they are and no sense of what they're supposed to do. Mythical stories are everywhere today. You look at superhero stories, you look at Lord of the Rings. These are massive myths, and we are starving for them, and teens can't get enough of them, and we're just lapping them up. Now, you can make the argument that some are harmful, and that's another discussion. We're at this point just talking about what are the kinds of stories. The third level of tale telling is mystagogical, or relating to mystery, relating to contact with the numinous most directly. And these are the mysteries, these are the sacraments, these are stories of saints and so on. So where we're going with legend fiction is we need more of the intentional mythical tale telling. We need more intentional sacred tale telling and intentional fairy tale, but understanding them from this point of view. Because if you don't know your audience, and if you don't know yourself and the journey that you're on, you're going to have a very hard time actually telling a story that people are going to want to read, because you don't yet know where you're going. An author is somebody who is in love with an idea, and they're dramatizing it and they're leading with it in a story form. What is a novel or a story? It's like a mystery play. It's like an ancient Greek play where you've got a core idea and you create characters to walk around it and wrestle with it and deal with it and so on. Yes, you can write stories purely for the fun of it. But if your desire is to be an author that is offering a good, then our own faith journey is just as important as learning to be a good craftsperson or craftsman with the craft of writing.
Just hearing you talk, obviously, as an author of this age range myself, I agree with what you're saying. And I often like to plug CatholicTeenBooks.com, which has 16 of us authors that are writing for teens. Some of them in the mythical range, like you're talking about, some of them more just kind of contemporary storytelling. But your legend fiction is more than just a place where teens can read. You're also encouraging them to write. Could you talk to that a little bit and why that's a beneficial practice?
Absolutely. We're oriented more around encouraging people to write and to self-express. There was a presentation I shared for Catholic Homeschool Online talking about why we need to encourage creativity in young people for their own inner and spiritual development, their own psychic development, and also adults can be doing this too. Things as simple as journaling, or in our case, what we do is encouraging people to join contests or join writing quests, or just they're going to be writing their own thing. So creating a space where they can share that is incredibly important. And this is why I believe writing is an important spiritual path, because not everybody is called to it. Some people are going to be called to public speaking. Some people are going to be called to be swimming teachers. Some make pottery. Everybody has this distinct contribution to make to creation that God wants them to discover about ourselves. Those of us who are called to write and to creativity, there's a very unique and distinct thing that I believe we're called to do, which is to not just think creatively, but to think deeply and to think lovingly about how human beings engage and interact with each other and with themselves. What authors do is this incredible, crazy thing where you create people inside you. And you love these people from the inside out because you know who they are from the inside. And then you put them through all kinds of adventures. And if you're creating your characters really well, they start to take on a life of their own. They feel like your friends. They feel believable. And sometimes they will not allow you to write them into a corner, and they become very difficult. And you and I chatted about this on our podcast together. I think that when you do that with attentiveness and when you're serious about having fun with your stories, whether it's an ancient myth or it's a modern myth or it's just drama or historical fiction or fantasy or sci-fi, it doesn't matter what. At its core, a story is somebody who wants something and must overcome a problem to get it. In the course of that, they grow. Bilbo goes on an adventure and a journey. He starts as a dragon curled up in his own little hobbit hole, goes on a journey and learns to give away and not hoard life anymore. And he comes back and he's now a different person. And he doesn't exactly know how to transmit that. So he fills Frodo with stories. And Frodo, just being a hobbit like everybody else, starts being his own little dragon. But he's 1 degree less, and he's more open to adventure, and he's more capable of embracing it when that call comes. That's what stories do. I would say for an author, it's like a distinct spiritual set of exercises. When you are being creative, you're not only participating with what Tolkien called co-creation or sub-creation with the creativity of God in you, but you are learning how to interact with other people because you're learning to love something from the inside out. This is the way that God loves us. He does not love us from the outside in because he knows us from the inside out. So when we exercise that with our little internal characters, who may not be so little. Aragorn, for example, is a world-dominating figure. Everybody knows Aragorn and Captain America and Thor. We all love them from the inside out because we get who they are as people. When you translate that into healthy and right living, we're also called to try to look at people and love them also from the inside out. And it's not something people normally do. We normally look at other people, judge them, and sort of start loving them from the outside in based on what we can, guess about who they are and stuff like that. That's not how God loves us. That's not how we love our characters. I would say in a specific way, authors can walk a particular path of learning to intuit and sit with other people and where they're going because they're doing it within themselves and they're wrestling with their own questions and doubts and drama constantly and enjoying it. And I think that gives you a particular edge, or it can, in how you relate with other people.
No, that's a beautiful explanation. And I've never actually fully thought through what you just said about Bilbo and Frodo from that context of storytelling and filling Frodo with stories and him becoming essentially more human, if you will, through that process. I love that. So if we're talking to parents and youth ministers, teachers, and they're like, hey, but how do I get kids to really get in touch with what you're talking about here? What would be your advice to them on how they can help the kids in their lives get better in touch with that?
That's a great question. I think it's easiest, obviously, when you can start when they're young and giving them the space and the encouragement to write and create. And they will probably start, never finish everything. Like my little girl is constantly starting stories and never finishing them. But that's actually the point, is to fall in love with the process of beginning. When you're young, start drawings, never finish them. Start a painting, never finish it. Walk away from everything. But that's okay. That's that phase, is to be in love with beginnings. Because what happens when we're too hard on children to finish things before they're ready, they lose the love of beginning. And when you don't have that, or when it's humiliated out of you, for example, by too much exposure, when you're still too tender, you just don't ever begin. Because as it said, the child is the father of the man. And how the child is formed will define how the adult turns to and responds to things. One, I think giving plenty of freedom and creativity. Instead of toys, provide tools that allow children to discover and paint and make a mess and have fun. If you're seeing the sense of enjoying writing and creativity, then talking with them, encouraging the spirit of play. I think that's the most beautiful and the most important thing any child can have. I just loved the ability to tell my little girl, go in and play. And then suddenly realized that's the most beautiful thing I could say to her, and she loves that. When you're older, what then happens is if you've started younger and you've reaffirmed that sense of it's okay to be creative and to make up things and to find out where things can go. I think we all do this constantly. When we're thinking through a problem, what are we doing but dramatizing a sequence of events in our minds, and we're field testing a fake version of us to see if that we're going to survive this particular encounter. It's probably the only way that we survived a lot of things in life is by running a movie through our heads and deciding if we like the outcome. What creative writers and kids and authors do is really take that seriously, really enter into that very much in the spirit of like the Ignatian exercises, which is to try to involve all of your senses in that. Most stories that young children and teens are going to write are purely going to be fun. They're going to be explorations of themselves. I mean, I look at my earlier stories and they're all wish fulfillment. They're all stuff I wanted out of life, what I was thinking was going on in my life at the time. So having plenty of patience and just toleration and fun and allowing them to be flexing them. It's like someone making a pot needs to make 1,000 pots before they can finally do the one good pot. But then what the adult does is the adult looks at that pot and recognizes it was never about actually making pots. It was about making something either functional or beautiful that could elevate somebody or support somebody while they are going through the act of maybe drinking something or containing something. And that's where the adult then looks at what is the symbol of what I have done? What is the meaning that I've been walking around this whole time that's been latent and I've been in love with, and I couldn't see it until I became an adult. For encouraging teens, if they don't have a community, maybe looking for if there is anything like that. I think one of the gifts my dad unintentionally gave me, I think as a kid, was driving me half an hour across town. He had a busy day, but he took me to a writing group, and it was just promoted in a newspaper. And we all just sat around and read a page of our stories. And what was wonderful was it just affirmed for me. They believed what I was doing was a good thing. Maybe not the thing I would be doing for everything, but it was a very good thing. My mom invested in me and put me through the Writers Institute for Children's Literature. And that was like a 1.5 or 2-year correspondence writing course. And it was one of the most valuable things that's ever happened to help encourage me, because in my case, I had loved a thing and I was showing a talent that they could see. And so they chose to invest in it. And so I'm incredibly grateful. I think if your teen is showing something like this kind of interest, the big thing I think is give them their space. Allow them to define a room or define their room, their time away, because what writers will usually be, I think, are extremely introspective, and they will observe a lot. And they will be probably deeply in touch with what they're feeling or what they're thinking, or they will need to chew through things. So I think if that's not your personality type, then allow them to be that. Allow them to not be you, because what they have to contribute is something different. And it might take them longer, or they might go weird places, but allow them to ask those questions. And I think that's what we need to be doing as parents, is working on ourselves to have the resilience and the stability of what we believe, that even if we don't have all the questions, we can still love somebody and sit with them in spite of how crazy their questions might be. And in today's world, there are a lot of questions that people have about everything. I think not needing to have any sense of fear is a very important thing, because teens today will have questions about everything that will probably be unnerving to some parents. And then they will want to turn that into the fiction and the stories that they're creating. It's like when you're growing a garden, you're going to get a lot of things growing. And as Christ said, don't pluck out all the tares, and you're going to rip out all the wheat as well. There's a time when that will need to come. But for now, we're not harvesting. We just need to let everything grow. And creating a safe space for the teen to do that, I think, is very important. As an adult, then you learn to define and set your own community and your own time space. But I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful. And although you were very careful not to trumpet your own product in your answer, I think this is a good time to let our listeners know if one of the ways they want to get their teen involved in the creative process is to join your team community. Could you tell them a little bit about how they can get involved with legend fiction? Is there a cost involved? Anything they might need to know? And where should they go to do it?
Absolutely. Easiest thing is to check us out at legendfiction.com. It's extremely affordable for a couple of reasons. One, I remember being an author and having absolutely no income to put towards anything. So we've kept it all the way down at $5 a month. I think it's like $30 a year or $100 lifetime. The reason being is we want to make sure we keep the trolls out. We want only people to join us who are serious about what they're doing. And especially if you're younger, you may be borrowing your parents' credit card or something, but it does help you put a little bit, just a little skin in the game to stay committed to writing a little bit of something. You can explore the community. I think you can set up like a 3-day trial and you can create a profile and have a look around. I've also got a video recording on the homepage where I'm scrolling through and showing you what the inside of the community is like, the different kinds of groups, how the main feed works, that sort of thing. I recommend joining our mailing list if you're not yet sure and you just want to circle what we're doing. I think it's every Thursday or so, we send out an email with all the latest posts from our blog. Usually they're full of videos and articles thinking about things or writing tips and so on from either myself or some of the mentors. You can have a look at some of the quarterly journals that we've put out to get a sense of some of the kinds of stories, the finalists from our contests. Of course, we'd just love to welcome you in. Most importantly, it's about encouraging you to write and giving you that space where you can give and get feedback, primarily from a group of people who think the same as you, or maybe you want to think like them or like this thing. And that's why I'll never say this is about me or this is what I think. I hope that what I'm offering is what the church has always held up as good and true and noble and beautiful. To quote St. Paul, I think it's St. Paul, it's Philippians, one of my favorite verses where he says, celebrate whatever is good and true and noble and beautiful and excellent. Wherever you find those, celebrate those. That's what we're trying to do. That's the kind of culture we're trying to bring. And pursuant to that, we do not allow negative feedback. Doesn't happen. Don't do it. You can be politely constructive. And we encourage you to support and encourage each other and call out a good thing that you do when you're writing, because encouraging where somebody is good is going to go a heck of a lot farther than slamming them for something we disagree with or don't think was good. And so we have an amazing community because everybody's on the same page, and we want to keep building that sense of this is a specific culture that we want to create.
Dominic, it sounds wonderful. I hope that parents will check this out for their teens and that the teens will check it out for themselves. And it's been wonderful having you on the show today.
Such a pleasure to be here, Tony. Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. We've been speaking with Dominic de Souza from Legend Fiction about ways to get our teens to not only become more spiritual, but to do it through creative fiction writing. Again, this is Anthony Barone Kolenk. If you have a question for me or a topic you want me to cover, drop me a line on my website at anthonykolenk.com. Also on that website, you can learn more about my historical fiction series, The Harwood Mysteries. Until next time, may God bless you and your families as we work together to raise faithful kids.